Hey, I'm not muted anymore. But Logan took my picture off.
You need to be muted.
I can't.
Jenny, you may turn down your volume.
I'm going to turn it all the way off.
We're not muted. Hello, Mary.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right. You made it.
I did. It's hot in Oklahoma.
I bet.
George is here too.
Hi, George.
Hi.
All right, Darwin, what do you think?
I think it's time. Go ahead, Kim.
All right. So, hello, good evening. My name is Kim Peters, and on behalf of the Los Animas County Extension Office, I wanted to say thank you for joining us this evening. I believe this topic is very timely, and I'm really thankful that Darwin agreed to share with us today. Before we get started, I wanted to tackle just a few housekeeping items. The first is, if you are joining on a computer, we will be sharing a PowerPoint, and so it's, in order to get the best view, if you will move your mouse and go up to the top where it says View Options, and click on that. If it's not set on side-by-side mode, I would suggest putting it there. It makes being able to view the slides and the chat much easier. Next thing, if you are joining us and your computer or phone didn't mute you on the way in, you would go ahead and mute yourselves until you're ready to speak. That just kind of keeps the background noise at a minimum and makes it easier for us to hear what Darwin is saying. We are going to have frequent question times, and so if you are comfortable speaking and asking a question, that you are more than welcome to do so, but if you would rather type it in the chat box, I will then read those questions aloud, and and Darwin will then answer them. Lastly, we've started recording, and so I hope to have this up on YouTube or something similar in the coming days. And everyone who signed up for the webinar via Eventbrite, or if I got your email otherwise, I will email you the link to where you can find this recording in the next few days. So I believe with that, I am finished, and I will turn it over to Darwin.
Thanks, Kim. Howdy out there in Zoom land. I am Darwin Pluhar, Diamond M Bar Futures Livestock in Consulting. I hope you all are staying safe, taking care of your loved ones, and quarantining if you need to. Most of us in agriculture seem to be very busy these days anyway. As we go along today, I'll stop frequently and answer questions. Also, as Kim said, this presentation is being recorded so you can refer to it later. At this point, I'd like to thank Kim Peters at Los Alamos County, Colorado Extension for organizing this meeting. Before we begin, let me tell you a bit about myself. I grew up one of 5 kids in eastern Montana, 41 miles north of Miles City, on a family ranch, small grain operation. I attended a one-room school through 8th grade, then went on to the big high school in Miles City. Growing up, we worked as a family, always getting better at production and of the business. Production agriculture was our thing. We hayed over a wide swath around the Miles City, Jordan area to obtain our hay for our winter needs. My brother and I acquired a semi around and upgraded our folks' equipment to increase efficiency. We were active in 4-H and FFA. We were into production agriculture. We heard the market numbers daily on the radio, and of course, the neighbors always compared weaning weights and who got the most for their calves. But frankly, we paid little attention to the price of our product. Like most, I guess we felt helpless when it came right down to it. We got what they offered. One year was burned into my consciousness, 1975. I was a junior in high school. My folks went to town for that annual meeting with the banker to renew the operating loan. They came home shell-shocked. The ag lender made it clear that they did a fine job of production, but their marketing was not good enough. He threatened that their loan might not be renewed the following year. That got my attention. In 1975, some of you are old enough to remember it, the cattle market was pretty rough then. 1/3 of producers were unable to stay in the cattle business. 1/3. Google Stratford of Texas, and you can read all about a 200,000 cattle entity whose business model was based on the belief that if you continually spread out your cash marketing of cattle, you did not have to concern yourself with the market. Just focus your attention on production. Stratford of Texas went broke in 1975. The 1986 dairy herd buyout and the 2003 U.S. mad cow disease discovery were just as brutal. Right now, take note and look around at your neighbors today and realize that this outcome could well be the same in 2020. Who survives time after time? Those who are ready to meet the unexpected challenge, the fittest. That's why I call my program Survival of the Fittest. Starting in 1975, I developed a keen interest in cattle markets and futures markets. I studied ag economics at Montana State University, graduating in 1981. Our profs were encouraging my wife Jenny and I to attend grad school, which led us to Texas A&M. My whole focus was the cattle futures market. I was fortunate to have the support to do a deep dive into the numbers and write my thesis, Economic Analysis of a Technical Hedging Strategy for Cattle Futures. Besides the 3 required professors on my graduate committee, I demanded a well-respected cattleman and renowned cattle market expert, each to have a vote on my work. I sought to find an unemotional, mathematical means which would trigger when to hedge and when to be unhedged. My goal was to statistically prove there was a simple technical tool that could be utilized by cattlemen over an entire cattle cycle to enhance profitability. The 5 members of my committee initially said couldn't be done. I proved it could. After earning my MS, I went to work in Dumas, Texas for a large cattle feeder, Cactus Feeders, who had 3 feed yards. I got to put into practice what I had researched, and I learned a tremendous amount. As Director of Hedging, I developed relationships with analysts and floor traders and some of the biggest players in the cattle business, producer to feeder to packer. At the insistence of the Cactus ownership, I developed the first formula marketing arrangement that I knew would change the way fat cattle were merchandised forever. After I helped Cactus Feeders grow to 8 feed yards and become the world's largest cattle feeder, as well as owning 3 ranches and a lot of feeder cattle out on wheat pasture, I went out on my own. 1993. Since 1984, I have maintained market records daily. 256 values entered onto the spreadsheet for a variety of commodities and markets. I believe it is a database unlike any other anywhere. Ask my wife, Jenny, no matter where we are or what we're doing, if it means getting that data gathered late at night, my spreadsheet gets updated daily. Now, there's a lot of noise right now about the producers taking it on the chin from the feed yards of the packers. I have to chuckle when I read producers ranting and raving, stating they take 99% of the risk of the cattle business, while feed yards and packing houses take 99% of the profit. The truth of the matter is, if you had continually fed cattle over the past 4.75 years on a national average, you would have lost $24.58 per head on a cash-to-cash basis. Think about the overhead and payroll at any feed yard or packing house, and I think you'd have to conclude that those businesses have a huge amount of risk as well. Those 8 feed yards at Cactus and their wheat pasture cattle, a limited move in the market on any given day was $11 million change to their bottom line. What do they do different from the producer? They utilize futures markets. They work out marketing arrangements. They do all they can to manage risk. Most producers are satisfied with gambling with the market by not utilizing the tools available. Even an old cowboy can learn something new. At this point, are there any questions? Okay, if not, the purpose of my presentation today is not to suggest the government steps in and tackles this issue, nor is it to commiserate with other producers where we whine about being forced to be price takers in this environment. Today, we are going to look at a solution that any cattleman can do to manage his risk in the marketplace. We are taking a solution-oriented approach. Jenny and I have a Pluhar family rule. Our kids got tired of hearing it, but we insisted. If you have a complaint, you must offer a solution, and you must be part of the solution. Today, we're talking solutions. The cattle market has roughly a 10-year cycle. 2 of those 10 years are usually pretty good for the producer. To be a cattle producer, you have to have a healthy dose of hope in your daily lives. But hoping for better markets does not pay the banker off. Just like drought is a given through much of the cattle country, difficult market conditions are as well. Today, I'm not here to talk about the structure of the cattle industry, the current issues that impact the cattle market, politics, or the April 17th government bailout of livestock producers. What's more important is not admiring the problem, but focusing on the solution. That's right, I said admiring the problem, which is exactly what many cattlemen are doing today. Time is of the essence, and I believe if you give a man a fish, he eats for a meal. However, if you teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. There's only 8 months left in 2020, and I want to help cattlemen go on the offensive with a simple tool that adds to their bottom line versus the alternative of being back in their heels when the banker gives them the bad news at the end of the year. Right now, cattlemen are inflicted with the 4 Ps. Number 1, paralyzed price takers. Number 2, production oriented. Number 3, pissed off. And number 4, pointing fingers. Cattlemen and cattlewomen, it's time. Time to clear your heads. Get some fire in your belly. Grow a thicker hide and look yourself in the mirror. It is time to take the reins, get control, and do something. No excuses, just results. Any questions?
You are welcome to speak, unmute yourself and speak if you have a question, or if you want to write it in the chat, we'll give you a few seconds to do that. If not, we'll move on.
My wife, Jenny. Okay.
All right, go ahead, Darwin.
My wife, Jenny, found these fencing pliers sticking out of dirt on a 2-track road leading to the fence. The correct tool was available, but if it is not used, this stretch of fence symbolizes neglect. Just like if you choose not to focus any attention to get better at your cattle marketing. However, if you pick up that fencing pliers, an essential tool in a successful cattle operation, and get to work, just like implementing a persistent and consistent hedging tool, soon you'll have results you can be proud of. Specifically, I'm going to teach you one tool you can take home and use to protect your beef and or dairy cattle operation from downside price risk. No matter how many bulls, cows, steers, heifers, calves, born or unborn, cattle you have committed to buy, and or frozen or fresh beef you own, this one tool can unemotionally signal you to hedge an asset when a downward trend is detected, and then signal you to exit your short hedge when an uptrend develops. So today, we are going to talk about a way to increase your marketing savvy and profit if you implement this simple tool. One tool. Production ag is fun. It may be infinitely more fun than to focus on the numbers. However, to survive the cattle business and profit, a successful cattle producer has to spend a few minutes a day, every day, focusing on the numbers and hedging when it is indicated by this unemotional, simple tool. You have to know a few basic definitions. My wife tells me constantly that we cannot manage the rangeland without knowing what plants grow there. You need to know a few basic definitions to get a grip on your marketing tool as well. These are available on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange's CME Group website underneath the glossary section. The first one is short hedge. Selling a futures contract to protect against possible declining prices of commodities that will be sold in the future. At the time the cash commodities are sold, the open futures position is closed by buying an equal number and type of futures contract as that were initially sold. My definition, it's a cattleman's tool to protect from a down market. Hedgers use the futures market to protect their business from adverse price changes. Short equals sell. You will sell a contract or contracts equal or nearly equal to the cattle or beef you expect to sell. Questions?
We all good?
Okay.
All right.
Closing price. The last price of a contract at the end of a trading session. It's available after 1:05 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday. It's the closing bell price at the end of the day. Market on the close MOC orders in order to be executed as a market order only in the closing range. Contract month and year. The month and year in which a given contract is deliverable in accordance with the rules for physically delivered contracts, or the month and year in which a given contract is finally settled in accordance with the rules for cash settled contract, synonymous with delivery month per year. Contract size. The actual amount of a commodity represented in a futures contract is specified in the contract specifications. 40,000 pounds for live cattle or fats, 50,000 pounds for feeder cattle futures. Questions?
All right, Darwin, let's keep going.
Open interest. The total number of futures contracts, long or short, in a delivery month or market that has been entered into and not yet offset or fulfilled by delivery, also known as open contracts or open commitments. Each open transaction has a buyer and a seller, but for calculations of open interest, only one side of the contract is counted. My definition, how many trades are still open? Liquidity concerns. Margin or performance bond, the minimum amount of funds that must be deposited as a performance bond by a customer with this broker. This is one of the financial safeguards that has helped ensure that clearing members perform on their customers' open futures and options contracts. Simple definition, the cash guarantee. Any questions?
Stan would like to know, are we hedging head or pounds?
Pounds. Cattle can be converted into pounds, and thus everything translates into pounds of beef, whether it be live or processed beef. Any other questions?
All right, let's go ahead.
Now, mind you, there's dozens, maybe hundreds of fact sheets or guidelines to marketing for producers available from many states' extension services, brokerage websites, etc. I can pick on my friend Daryl Peel here with the Oklahoma State University Extension. We were in Montana FFA together. They are good at explaining these definitions and the process. They do that job well. But, and it's a big but, they do not tell you how to know when to make a trade. The extension specialists, brokers, etc., are not going to take the liability of making your decision for you. You got to get up off your butt, pull the trigger. We're going to take that information in our fencing pliers and put them to work. How many contracts do I need? Remember, we said a live cattle futures contract. One contract represents 40,000 pounds of cattle or beef. Utilize live cattle futures to protect your downside price risk on beef and or dairy, bulls, cows, steers on feed, heifers on feed, frozen and or fresh beef. Remember, a feeder cattle futures contract, one contract represents 50,000 pounds of feeder cattle or calves. Use feeder cattle futures to protect your downside price risk of your grazing feeder beef and or dairy, steers and heifers, and your born and unborn beef and or dairy calves. If you anticipate weaning 725 pound cattle, you want to hedge them, you'll need one contract of feeder cattle per 69 head. Or if you have 138, 2 contracts. If you have 2,000, 29 contracts. How much margin money is required? Live cattle, $2,150 per contract. Feeder cattle, $4,860 per contract. Here's a picture of what the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange live cattle and feeder cattle futures open outcry pits look like. It may look like chaos. However, once you have spent time there, you discover it is very well organized. Now, only 2% of the volume occurs via open outcry, since 98% occurs digitally via the electronic means known as Globex. All right. You need to start a simple Excel spreadsheet. Each row will represent a day of information. Column-wise, you'll need the first one for a date with various column headers for the live cattle and feeder cattle closes and the moving averages and differentials between the moving averages. Where do I find these numbers? Go to the cmegroup.com website and pull up the live cattle settlements and the feeder cattle settlements. As an example, here is the feeder cattle futures settlements, and you'll notice you will not pull the open, high, low, or last number. The settle number is the one that you're looking for. To begin the spreadsheet, as in this example, we started 6 months ago with the October 17th of 2019 row of information. And we pulled the June live cattle close and the May feeder cattle closes on that date. The next day, you do the same thing. And then after 7 days, you have enough information to generate a 7-day moving average, which in this case, on October the 25th, that was 113.954 for live cattle. It was 142.257 for feeder cattle. You need to take all of it to 3 decimal places. You continue this process day after day, and then after you've gathered 13 days worth of information, okay, let's first talk about going from the initial 7-day moving average to the next day's 7-day moving average. So on October the 28th, you're going to add a number and you're going to drop the oldest number. Therefore, on October the 28th, then the moving average number for the 7-day is 114.188 and 142.450 for May feeder cattle. And this process continues. And then on the 13th day, in addition to having the 7-day, you'll have a 13-day moving average. So for the last 13-day closes, the average of that for June cattle is 115.190. In the same way for feeder cattle, the May contract, the average over the last 13 days is 143.712. Now the key is the 7 minus the 13. The 7 minus the 13 on November the 4th was a plus 1.192 for June live cattle. It was a plus 1.424. As long as the 7 minus the 13 is positive, you stay unhedged. Questions?
Anybody?
I have
Okay, Teresa.
First of all, are you going to allow us to print off some of these spreadsheets? And second of all, when you pick your spots months in order to do that with, are they consecutive spot months like for live cattle and future cattle to be able to come up with those numbers?
You will switch when you always want to stay where there is the most open interest. So essentially, an example, today, we have the April live cattle expiring in both the fats and in the feeders by the end of the month. So your focus of attention should be on the June and the August live cattle contracts where all the open interest is, in the same way that your focus of attention should be on the May and the August cattle contracts. And you need to keep each contract separate. And there will be a transition where you'll need to be moving your interest from one contract to the next, but you always calculate the moving averages based off of a specific contract. In other words, make sure that your 7-day and your 13-day moving average corresponds to the June cattle. When you start tracking the August cattle, it has to have its own unique 7-day and 13-day moving average.
Until we can provide them a PDF. if they want.
And yes, we can provide a PDF of this.
Thank you.
You bet.
We have another question.
Yes.
As long as 7 minus 13 is positive, do you stay hedged or unhedged?
You stay unhedged because you're in an uptrend. The 7 is above the 13. A short term is above the long term moving average, which signifies that the trend is up.
We have more examples.
Anybody
And
else?
We'll explain this as we develop this spreadsheet that we have on your screen.
All right.
Okay. Building into that spreadsheet, you'll notice that the 7 minus the 13 continues to stay positive until the 18th of November, when it signaled that you needed to sell May feeder cattle on the close at 146.375. 2 days later, June live cattle signal you to sell at 117.85. You will stay hedged as long as the 7 minus the 13 is negative, which signals that you're in a downtrend.
Ask if there's any questions.
Any questions?
All right.
Okay, to reinforce this, moving forward, you'll see how on December the 30th, June live cattle signaled you to hedge at 119 even. However, 3 days later, it told you to exit your hedge. So you sold your hedge at 119, you lifted it by purchasing it back at 117.675, so you picked up a 1.325 per hundredweight on your June live cattle hedge position. On January the 2nd, May feeder signaled you to hedge at 148.025. You were only in it for 1 day. You picked it. You lifted your hedge by buying your May feeder cattle contract back at 147.025. Thus, you picked up $1 per hundredweight on your May feeder cattle hedge. And then you stayed unhedged in both June live cattle and May feeder cattle until January the 22nd, when you rehedged them at 147.925. Questions?
There's a question in the chat that says, did you say to stay hedged? And I'm not exactly sure when she's referring to. Jan, if you wanted to clarify.
Okay, but you stay on hedge as long as the number remains positive, the 7 minus the 13. On the day that the 7 crosses the 13 and thus you have a differential that's negative, that's the day that you hedge by selling MOC, market on the close. And you remain hedged as long as that 7 minus the 13 is negative.
All right, I think she got her
Okay.
answer there. So,
Okay?
Okay, ready to go on?
Yes. Again, on the day the trigger occurs, the order you place with your broker is an MOC order, market on the close. You'll be able to determine on your spreadsheet by adding one extra row to give you some idea. You can tell the day before what the level will be to trigger an action so that you can submit an order prior to the close, informing your broker of what you need to do. So what do I tell my broker when I place my order? Here's an example. I did my homework on Friday night. The math said that if June live cattle closes below 87.175 Monday, April the 27th, to sell however many June contracts I need to protect myself, MOC Globex, market on the close electronically. And I prefer you text that broker. That way he has your exact order in writing. On Monday, April the 27th, at the close, the market was below 87.175. So automatically, I got hedged in June cattle on the close. So in the real world, what does this look like? Here are the trades that occurred with this system since October the 17th of last year. Since October 17th, when you started your spreadsheet, you would have made $129.08 per head in 194 days. Questions?
So I'm sorry, I have another question. What about when you when does it become a speculation and not a hedge? I mean, how do you really define
As
that?
long as you have an underlying asset that you're trying to protect downside price risk on, it is a hedge. If you did not own any cattle or any beef, it would be a spec trade.
Yeah, but what about like buying fall feeders and you're expecting to buy fall feeders later on, and then when the market gets here, something happened like it did now, and you've got a hedge up.
Then you're a spec trader.
Thank you.
okay, we have a question.
Okay.
Why did you choose the 7 and 13-day moving averages? If trading enough contracts, it could overload the opposing offers?
When I did my thesis at Texas A&M, I looked at all the various combinations in order to see which one optimized profitability. And of all the different alternatives, the 7 and 13 proved to be the most profitable. 3 and 10, 5 and 20. I can't tell you how many different number combinations were tried over a 10-year test period. And the 7 minus the 13 consistently outperformed the rest of them and has continued to consistently outperform other alternatives. Now, almost 45 years worth of data.
Okay, another question. Someone on their phone has, I think, maybe been cutting in and out, and so they want to confirm that, is that 128 per head with commissions?
Okay, what you need to do is customize this to your operation. You need to take the cows and bulls and the weight that you're maintaining them at, plus projected selling weight of your cattle on feed, feeder cattle, calves at weaning, beef that you plan on selling, and so forth, in order to come up with a weight of beef that you need to protect with in order to determine the number of contracts that you need to use for your operation. Okay. Does that answer your question?
No, she asked about commissions.
Commissions vary depending upon your broker. And that is something that you need to negotiate with your broker, because you no longer need his full advice of what he thinks is going on in the market. All you need to have from that broker is the execution of your order. He receives a text from you prior to the open, and he knows your intentions of what you need to do, so you're not going to waste a lot of his time, and thus he should be able to provide that service for a reduced fee.
So what would a typical round commission be?
I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, in terms of a range, from $5 a trade to $120 a trade.
All right. Any more questions?
And that's divided between 69 head, for example.
All right.
And that's per contract, not per head. Over the last 4.75 years, cash cattle feeding ranged in profitability from plus $476 a head, which occurred in May of 2017, to a negative $554.73 that occurred in December of 2015. That's half the average cattle cycle. If you had consistently fed cattle over the last 4.75 years, on average, when you sold fat cattle, you lost $24.27 per head. You cannot survive this business on a cash-to-cash basis. Survival of the fittest. Will you be the fittest? In summary, 1 tool, 5 steps every day. First, you got to access the closing feeder cattle price and closing live cattle price. Second, you got to calculate a 7-day moving average. Third, you got to calculate the 13-day moving average. Fourth, got to make a decision. Buy, sell, or no action necessary. Finally, you have to execute. Most important step. Questions?
Monitor last. You can't see the chat.
Okay, we have, if trading enough contracts, it could overload the opposing offers on the close. Just do percentage daily or get away from MOC.
If you are concerned enough about you overloading the system, then spread them out over the two contracts that have the most open interest in live cattle and the two contracts that have the most open interest in feeder cattle. Presently, that is June and August cattle and May and August feeder cattle. But from experience, you're better off to do a market on the close versus thinking that you can outsmart the system and try to do it a better way.
Okay, we have another question. What is the impact of a one-day anomaly in contract close, say limit up or limit down, in the 7 and 13-day moving averages? Do you adjust anything?
None whatsoever. Any other questions?
I have another question. You're
Yes.
talking about the open interest, and you know exactly what months are in the open interest. How about some of us who are trying to figure that out for ourselves? What parameters do you use to figure that out?
You, on that page that you get your settlements from, the far right column will have the previous day's open interest figure listed there.
I put it on the screen.
If you look right to the right on the screen, the most right column always carries the previous day's open interest. So that way you always know where the two contracts are that have the most open interest. And that's where you need to structure your hedging program.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Okay.
if you've got cattle that are selling in December, do you still use the markets with the most volume or most contracts?
Yes, that's where your liquidity is. And it gives much better profitability results also.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. History of performance for your program over the years, percent winners and percent losers.
67% winners.
All right, do we have any other questions? Feel free to speak up. Okay.
At this time, I wish you good luck in utilizing the survival of fittest simple tool in profiting in the cattle business. If you have any questions in terms of doing it right, or are concerned about your ability to do it, please call me at 806-679-3540 and leave your name, number, and a brief message on my voicemail, because a lot of time I'm not instantly available to answer my phone. And I'd be more than happy to help you with any questions that you might have. I'd like to thank God for his blessings. I'd like to thank my family for their love and support and their pursuing their passions. And again, I'd like to thank Kim Peters in the Los Animas County, Colorado Extension for organizing this meeting to help you be more successful in your cattle business. Good night.
Thanks, Darwin.
You bet. Glad to do it.
If you wanted to real quickly answer one more question, if Meg is still on, she
Sure.
would like to know, how often does the time of most open interest change?
It changes the most the second week of the odd months. In other words, if you watch the June contract, the 6th to 10th business day of May, you'll see a huge amount of open interest move from the June to the August contract in what's called the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index roll.
All right. All right, well, if there are no more questions, we will call it an evening, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for organizing. Thanks, Darwin.
It was amazing. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
You're welcome.
I need him to sit right here with the people.
I'm out. Yeah, get him out. Wave then. Wave at everybody. Bye. Bev liked the slide and I had a problem. Certainly, it was all very cool. We'll just let me put